second ever code talk.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you're one of the trailblazers.
No pressure at all.
Yeah, no pressure at all.
Awesome.
That's actually the motto for the whole class, is that hashtag no pressure. So Vladimir,
that's
I
awesome.
will give you the floor so you can tell more about yourself.
And I think I can remove my mask.
Yeah, you can do it.
Yeah, freedom. So what's the optimum distance for the mic? Is this fine?
Yeah,
I'm bad with mics. I kind of hate mics. Hi, everyone. Hi, guys. Hi again. Thanks for staying around. I know it's late and dark and scary, but I think we can have a useful conversation today. My name is Vladimir in Russian context, Vlad in the English context, because it's always awkward when I speak English. And I'm like, my name is Vladimir, like Putin, not related. So I adopted like a Vlad identity for the English circles. So you can call me anything based on how you feel, what the vibe is. I'm originally from Narva, from Krayenholm, if anyone here is from this lovely neighborhood and knows about it. And when I finished school, I moved to Tallinn to study at Tautech, study software development. In my second year, I got hired as a software developer in the company which made mobile games. I didn't ask for this, but it just happened. I got the job. I loved it. I still think programming is one of the best jobs anyone can get. And I'll get to that, I think. I will inevitably talk about how much I miss programming because I haven't done it in 10 years, I mean, professionally. And I spent about a year and a half in that company working on games for old phones. I think you remember the old dumb phones with buttons and stuff, they're still around. So we make games for those devices. Actually, we didn't make games, we just received games from like real developers and kind of ported them to all the other devices so they could work on them. But that was still fun. And that was my first programming job. It was pretty awesome. But then it all ended abruptly because I was laid off because our company was shut down. It was the recession of 2008, 2009. And we all lost our jobs simultaneously. And then at that point, I decided that I will not pursue the career of software developer for the time being because I had other ideas. I really wanted to try making some games for Android. And that was 2009. I'm not sure if you guys knew of Android in 2009, but we kind of got lucky because we got our hands on one of the first devices. So we could see that, you know, functionally speaking, the system was quite similar to what the iPhones had at the time. So we decided, you know, we were not good enough for the App Store, so we could try a hand at building something for Android. And naturally, that was games. And that thing worked out pretty well for us. That venture became a reasonably successful one. We've survived, and until now, we've made about 70 million euro in net revenue with our own funding in the beginning. And of course, obviously, generating nice returns for the founders, shareholders, for the Estonian economy overall, kind of sending waves in the Estonian gaming or game development ecosystem as well. So that's, I guess, the reason why I'm here, because I think this transition from working as a developer to building our own products to kind of becoming a manager and a CEO in a company is interesting. So initially, I'll focus on that bit, on my programming job, why I think it's really awesome to code, not just professionally, but just to be able to code as a hobby, as, you know, a skill you possess. And then this part where, you know, we go from just coding to building stuff for other people to use, and then potentially making lots and lots of money in the process. Maybe, perhaps, sometimes, rarely, but eventually. But even though that's kind of the objective of my initial talk idea, I'm really for you guys. I was invited to dedicate an hour of my time to help you. So this is not for me. This is not for my amusement. Of course, I like being in the center of attention, kind of hearing the sound of my voice. Everyone loves that. But I must be useful to you. So if you feel that, you know, what I'm talking about is not interesting, not engaging, not relevant, not practically useful, guide me somewhere, okay? Don't just sit with this, you know, typical face. Especially in Ida-Virumaa, we are masters of these faces. I am one. Please don't do this. Raise your hand, ask me a really good question directly somewhere. This is fine. I like to be interrupted. I like to talk, not just lecture, because otherwise I get carried away and becomes boring. So I wasn't originally going to go into software development. I wanted to do civil engineering. Why? Well, because that was around 2005, 2006. And I had my friends from school who left school in the 9th grade, went to work at the construction site, and now they were wearing Gucci glasses, and they were like, cash flying everywhere, because that was the construction boom back in the day. Everybody was getting super rich. And of course, being a kid from Narva, from Kerenholm, I wanted to get rich as well. I wanted Gucci glasses. So I was totally going to, being a construction engineer, have an amazing career, laden with cash all the way in. But my dad, who actually had a small business at the time, he was reading the business newspapers. He kind of suggested that I look at software development because he was reading all these job postings. Hey guys, come in, take a seat. Don't stand there, it's fine. So he was reading the job postings about, companies looking for software developers. And he was like, hey, there is demand on the market. Maybe you should look there. I smell money. And that kind of resonated with the 17-year-old me, money, this is what I like. So eventually I filed my documents to the Tautech software development class, got in, fell in love. So counterintuitively, obviously as a normal kid, I was thinking, what does my father know about my aspirations? He's a doctor, for Christ's sake, right? How can he give me career advice? But ultimately the final bit came from him. And I'm not making any conclusions from this, it's just a fact. Weird, but they really impacted my career with this little comment. And then I started developing, and I realized that I got it completely wrong when I was thinking about programming as a kid, because I kind of always did something with the computer. I got my first computer in 1997, which was really early. And I was always building some websites, some maps for Half-Life and Counter-Strike, and always working on content. But I kind of stayed away from programming because I thought that was super boring and math-based. You had to be good with calculus. You had to solve like mathematical equations. Of course, this is crap. Writing code is more like writing poems than solving math problems. It's really creative. It's really awesome. And I totally fell in love with it. And still to this day, I think that coding professionally or for leisure is super beneficial for multiple reasons. Number one, you get to hang out with smart people. And again, as a kid, I didn't really think about it much because you don't have that kind of choice, when you're growing up, because you are kind of put in a society, your family, your neighborhood, your school, and you can kind of choose, what kind of people you hang out with at school, but typically you want to hang out with cool people, not necessarily smart people. You don't have a whole lot of latitude there, right? So you can kind of make some choices, but they're not very impactful. As an adult, though, it makes massive difference, because if you spend too much time with idiots, only one of two things can happen. You become an idiot yourself, or you develop this elevated fake self of superiority because everyone around is dumb and you think you're really smart. Sometimes you're not smart at all. It's just that, the bar is so low. And conversely, when you hang out with smart people, you are challenged to be smart. You are influenced by their ideas. You are influenced by their ambition. And this is uncomfortable, but this is how you develop. And it's always, this question of, do you set a low bar and feel good about yourself? Or do you set a high bar and feel maybe bad about yourself, but actually win in the long run? So the thing about programming is your ability to write good code depends heavily on your intelligence. So first, naturally, as you are learning, as you're practicing this, if you are solving tough problems, you become more intelligent. This is a fact because you're solving difficult problems. And then you also get immersed in a sea of smart people because, everyone is kind of trying to be smart in this environment. Sometimes annoying, but smart. So that's really useful. And I think generally speaking, intelligence is the best investment one can make because, we all appreciate good looks. We all appreciate physique. We all appreciate money. But ultimately, again, in the long run, if you are smart, you're unstoppable. You can solve any kind of problem. Wealth generation becomes easy at some point if you're really smart. You are not afraid of losing all your belongings because you're going to make that money again. It's not that complicated. It can take time, but the secret is not hidden. You can come to terms with yourself really easily. if you are smart enough, so you can actually live a happy life. And in Russian culture, we tend to say, the ones who smile, the ones who are happy are typically idiots. That's why they're smiling. They don't appreciate the misery of the world around them. But I think this is fundamentally wrong in the modern society. I think this is rooted in this, our Russian/Soviet culture of suffering. You have to suffer to be a good citizen, and then you are kind of worthy of existence. In my experience, most people who are consistently satisfied and happy. You have a question? Go ahead.
Meil on üks meeting praegult ju.
Yeah, sure. So the question is, considering my background, like post-Soviet small town, this kind of mentality where you have to suffer through life and not
mingi
and then founding a company, and kind of living a completely different lifestyle. How was this transition? Was it difficult? Was it challenging? The thing about wealth is it's not that painful, when you're suddenly you don't have to think about your personal finances ever again. You can't really complain about this, so it's really difficult to find any downsides in becoming wealthy. A lot of people get it wrong because typically when we envision rich people, we think about all the status symbols, like flashy cars, nice property, expensive smartphones, those things. But in practice, those things kind of not part of wealth as such, because they kind of push you back against, on your path to becoming rich, because you're buying liabilities rather than assets. What wealth really does to you, it kind of eliminates the pain. So you don't have to worry that much about your health because you can afford all the best doctors, all the best healthcare. You don't have to worry about your security. You don't have to worry about, what if my car breaks when I'm driving to Narva-Jõesuu right now? Whatever, I don't care. There's always another one. And it just removes a lot of small and medium headaches that you have in your life. So it's definitely worth striving for. What many people get wrong when they reach some kind of prosperity is that they chase status symbols, and they're kind of trying to prove to everyone around them that they are, have finally made it. And this is a completely different game. So for me, the transition was super easy because I wasn't at any point focused on, flashing wealth. I wasn't focused on, making some money and spending that money immediately and showing, proving to everyone, like, hey, I can afford this. What happened in 2012 when we, that year we made 5 million in net profit. So that was a really nice year. I think that was the nicest year we've had on a profitability basis. And I bought myself a new TV for 400 euro. So that was my, attitude towards buying nice things. And over time, that kind of changed a little bit as I became older. I've kind of found a better balance because you have to take care of yourself. You have to, stay happy, stay emotionally fit. So I started paying more attention to eliminating, all the distracting issues in my life that required investment. But the transition wasn't difficult. And but then again, I'm the lucky one because even though I kind of commented on this mentality that we were brought up in, I don't feel I was really infected with it because I think that was my parents who really instilled this sense of, hey, go get it in me. So I wasn't, ever criticized for trying to achieve something like some kids were. I wasn't punished for sticking out like some kids were. So I guess my parents made it easy. That was a long answer. I hope I at least touched on the relevant subject there. So going back to programming for a bit, hanging out with smart people, super important. There are multiple careers where you end up in a company of really intelligent people that stimulate you to become more intelligent. But I think programming provides one of the lowest barriers of entry because you can learn to code in a few weeks and months, and then you can actually start working and you kind of on ramp gradually. Whereas if you wanted to, go to SpaceX and design rockets, probably there would be some considerably higher bar you have to clear. The second major benefit of learning to code and being able to code in everyday life and profession is that you can actually build things that have utility. And you, of course, in many lines of work, you build things that have utility, but the beauty of programming is that you build software which is easily scalable. So if someone else finds it useful, they can replicate it easily. You all know this. I won't go any deeper. But this is not just something you do professionally. This is helpful in everyday life as well. If you develop this programmer's mindset or engineer's mindset. For example, 4 years ago, we were looking for a new office space in Tallinn. We had to move, and we had 3 locations in mind in different parts of town. And I wanted to find out which, how do they affect the logistics of the employees? Like how many people suffer if we move to another place because they live elsewhere and their time in transit increases. And what would most people do is, look at the map and see which one is more central because, typically if it's in the center, you cannot go wrong. It's equidistant from everyone else. So it must be good. It doesn't work this way in practice because it can be in the center, but really hard to get to because of the traffic, because of how the public transit is organized. So I wanted to be really, anal about it and dig down deep and find out what's the actual cost and transit time. So what I did was very simple. I pulled a CSV or an Excel file of all the addresses of all the employees and used the Google Maps API to give me the estimated travel time for every combination of the addresses of the employee and the office at around 10 in the morning, give or take. And I got a nice spreadsheet with the deltas, like the current office, office A, office B, office C, the averages, and I could see which guys would suffer the most, which were the winners. And, it probably would have taken like 10 hours to do this manually. So I would never do this. Frankly, this was not the most useful thing you can imagine, but it was fun to do. It gave me some useful information as well. And the principle is the same. If I wasn't a developer, if I didn't have the developer mindset, I wouldn't be thinking in this direction. I would not even assume that you could, use Google Maps API for free to do this kind of calculations and give a nice spreadsheet, get a nice spreadsheet as a result. So the beauty about programming is that you are kind of looking for opportunities to mix and match things. Like what if I take this API and this piece of software and this database and this and this and that and mix and match and produce something that has utility for me and then maybe for other people as well. And if it has utility for other people, it can suddenly become scalable because all the other people are suddenly interested in using it. Of course, in my example, that's not a big market because people don't move offices too often. So it's highly unlikely I'll be able to find 10 people interested in this. That was not the purpose. But in many cases, you'd be surprised by how many people are kind of trying to solve the same problem. So you give them this new solution and they are ready to adopt it. And if you work on it hard enough and long enough, then there's a point where it becomes so good that people are incentivized to pay for it because it makes more economic sense for them to pay you rather than continue the old ways or pay someone else to build it in-house. And this is how many, actually some even Estonian famous startups originated by building tools for other companies to use and getting to a point where the tools are so insanely good that lots and lots of developers or businesses are interested in paying for those tools. And then it kind of follows the same trajectory. Nobody needs this. Some people want this, but it's not good enough. It's okay. And then it's so good that everybody wants it. And then you have a business. Or if you're working in the open source community, for example, you don't want to monetize your work, but you can leverage it to build a personal profile, build a personal brand. It's an asset as well. You can monetize it later. And this brings me to the next massive benefit of programming, which I really enjoyed and I kind of obviously took advantage of, is building useful stuff where you have equity. And I emphasize equity because, again, going back to wealth creation, in my opinion, having equity in the project is the only way you can get rich without luck. Of course, you can get lucky or unlucky, but if you are aiming through consistent work to become wealthy, you need to have equity somewhere. And there's a fundamental principle why even as a highly paid professional, you can become wealthy. Even if you are like a really, really good software developer, you could be making 3, 4, 5, 6,000 euro a month. You're not getting wealthy. And by wealthy, I mean a level where you could stop working today and choose not to work the rest of your life and you're still set. And you don't have to worry about your personal finances ever again. I'm not talking billionaire wealthy. I'm talking, you know, I don't have to worry about money every first or like the last date of the month. And the reason why it works this way, the reason why even highly paid professionals cannot get wealthy is because ultimately you are renting out your time. So when you're sleeping, you're not making money. You're only making money when you're working. And then you're being paid the market rates, which means that you are essentially replaceable. So even if you are highly competent as someone else offering the same kind of service, more or less for the same price or cheaper. So you're selling your time on the market and the market dictates how much it's worth. And there is a cap on how much you can make. You cannot, as a software developer, charge 2,000 euro per hour. Maybe in some really exotic cases, but that's not going to last a whole lot of time. It might be, you know, one hour of work per year when you really need it, when it's really something specific. But to consistently generate lots of wealth, you have to have equity in something that is scalable, where the input that you're making is not tied to output. And this is the reason why, you know, even very successful lawyers, highly paid lawyers, don't become rich by just practicing law. They start law firms where they hire people and they kind of scale the operation and then they exist on the margins. Doctors, the same thing. Really, even, you know, in the US, in UK, in highly developed Western societies, capitalist societies where doctors are highly paid, they don't become wealthy by just doing their craft. Fundamentally impossible because of the economics of the market. They start their own clinics and then they become rich. Hollywood actors, directors get paid really well for their work. But that's not because their acting is 10,000 times better than of the average guys, because they have the personal brand where they have equity. So they're basically monetizing the brand because they're lending their brand to the movie and that helps sell the movie, attract other talent, and so on and so forth. And there are multiple ways to acquire equity in projects. Really, there's so many options. Like, again, if you go and join a startup and you get stock options, no matter what the job is, development, art, marketing, anything, that's equity. If it takes off, you're golden in some cases. If you're a creator, creating some kind of content, it becomes popular, create a hit song, create a hit TikTok channel, you have equity, you're golden. Programming is one of the more predictable ways of doing this because programming is all about building stuff. And as you build stuff, you eventually, you know, if you're smart and dedicated, you eventually build stuff that's useful to other people. Sometimes that becomes scalable. In my case, I made an Android application when I think I was in my first year at my work. So, you know, I got into the university, I studied for a year and a half, I got that job. And then about maybe a year later, I did this app, which didn't make me a lot of money, but it made me some money. And I was genuinely surprised because the market was really small. The app was really niche. I made it for fun. I basically made it for myself and my friends. That was something that we needed. But I attached a sort of business model to it and it kind of started monetizing on a small scale. And I was like, wow, I made it for 5 people. It got 5,000 downloads. That's interesting. And then obviously when we started making Android games, same principle. We were a group of 3 guys writing code. Of course, the first like 3, 4, 5 games they failed miserably. But then eventually we came across some really good concepts, kind of hit the sweet spot in the market. And then suddenly, you know, it converted from 1,000 downloads to, in some cases, 100,000 downloads per day. So it was the same product, but it got to the point where it's in the right place in the market. Suddenly everybody wants it. And the breakthrough title that we did in 2011, at the end of the day, got about 350 million downloads. So I think that's one of the more popular Estonian products based on the total size of the audience that kind of touched. And that wasn't because, you know, the game was so insanely good. It wasn't that good. It was just something that people wanted at the time. And that happens all the time, everywhere, in all lines of business and entertainment. If you consistently create something, occasionally things go viral, they go big. At different scale, a different context. But this is really key, you know, if you want to generate wealth and kind of solve your financial problems early and focus on something else other than making it to the next paycheck, that you focus on equity and capturing, first creating these opportunities where your output can be scalable, and then capturing, the equity you have there. Thank you. I've been talking for too long. I can feel it. No, of course not. Of course not. Yeah, yeah, sorry. So the question is, I'm dropping all this words of wisdom right now. And the question is basically, was I that smart when I was a kid? Kind of always knowing that I want to build a company because that's what makes people rich. Or, actually I wasn't ever motivated by, becoming rich. I didn't even realize the value of wealth until I kind of experienced it. Because again, I come from this background where rich typically means evil, and I didn't want to be evil. I wanted to just, make enough money to live a normal life. So I wasn't even fantasizing in that direction, but I really wanted to build something. And yeah, even as a teenager, I was always building stuff. Again, some video game maps, some websites, kind of trying to build something for other people. And I was always driven by this idea that I build something and someone else uses it and they find utility in it and they experience it. And this is like my creation alive, kind of a God complex where you work with inanimate objects and then they come to life and they exist and people interact with them. That's something I kind of figured out as a teenager already. But obviously when I was choosing my career, I wasn't thinking this way. I was like, oh, this looks nice. Let's give it a shot. My dad runs a business. It's not a big business by any measure. It's like a small family business, but that I think affected my thinking as well, because he quit his job in the 90s, I think early 90s. And he has managed to keep the family afloat by working independently. So I was thinking, oh, that's pretty cool. I want to be like this guy too. And then when I was already studying programming, I wasn't really kind of positioning myself for starting a company. I was living in a dorm on like 200 euro per month. I wanted to get a job and, start paying my bills, like move to a nicer place. And, I had very low ambitions. But at the same time, as I was reading about programming, as I was learning, I was coming into contact with different materials that, told the stories of people who do something and it became great. I was reading the essays of Paul Graham from Y Combinator. And now, everybody knows Y Combinator, everybody knows this guy. 13 years ago, maybe he wasn't that popular in this part of the world. And he was talking about startup life and how, a bunch of guys built something and then they got funded and then kind of escalated. So I kind of had this, at this point, started having these fantasies in my mind, but I wasn't consciously trying to get there. I was like taking it one step at a time. And that's, the reason why I'm here, because I'm supposed to give you, hey, you should do this. You should all become wealthy, which is possible. Like all of you can, definitely. And this is not the motivational speaker in me talking. This is, mathematically proven. But I did not have anyone give me this talk when I was a kid. We had really grounded expectations. Give me some good questions. Let's talk. Yeah, so the question is if I can name any of the games that we made that have become quite popular. So the biggest game by the number of total downloads is called Drag Racing. That was released back in 2011. We made it as a team of 3-4 guys. We made it in 6 weeks on a budget of basically a 6-pack of beer and some noodles. It was really, really, really unsophisticated, but we kind of checked all the right boxes at the time because, it's often portrayed as a first game. It wasn't a first game. Obviously, we've been doing this for 1.5 years by then. And we kind of figured out that you cannot sell games on Android. They have to be free. You have to monetize with advertisements. They have to be really approachable, really lightweight, should run on all the different phones, should be playable on the small screens, touch screen oriented. So there's like a whole list of different boxes we checked with that one. And we kind of expected it to become big, but by big, we thought maybe 10,000 euro a month, 15,000 euro a month. But then the market grew and the game kind of hit the sweet spot. And actually it was #1 most downloaded racing game on Android for 14 months uninterrupted on the Android market. Now Google Play used to be called Android market. So that was quite big. And that one got, the last time I checked was 270 million downloads, but that was like 5 years ago. So now it should be somewhere in 350, I guess. The funny thing is, most people don't remember the game because mobile games are kind of disposable, and that was 10 years ago. So even though we have this massive audience, it's not like Need for Speed, right? Because, of course, I'm not putting them in the same, basket. They are not comparable by production value or cultural impact. It's just that when people consume console and PC games, they kind of pay more attention to what they're consuming because they make those choices. Some people pay for games, some people make the effort to pirate games. So that's kind of a buy-in from the player. On the smartphones, like easy come, easy go. People spend 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. So many games that actually have tens of millions of downloads, hundreds of millions of downloads, they're kind of invisible to the public. And then when you show them to people, like, oh, I used to play it back in when I was at school. Another one that's quite prominent is also a racing game called Nitro Nation. This one is current. It's 3D, really nice, about 75 million downloads. Not as big, but it's kind of more niche, more hardcore, more demanding. So, comparatively smaller by audience, but larger than by revenue. So that one is our current flagship. We also have made a reasonably successful VR game for PC. So if you go to Steam virtual reality top sellers list, you're gonna find Into the Radius. They are typically placed between number 10 and number 15 worldwide. Yesterday were number 5, right next to Half of Alex, which was really nice, but we made a sale. We ran a promo, so that's cheating. Typically, it's like top 15 worldwide by revenue. And, we're working on more VR games, so this is quite exciting. I'm really hyped about VR, by the way, especially standalone VR. Yesterday, we made an announcement of a blockchain-based racing game, which is, again, a continuation of this legacy we have since 2011. We actually did blockchain games 3 years ago, but stopped when this crypto nuclear winter descended. We're resuming now. And the announcement was about a partnership with Mythical Games, who are one of the top 10 most prominent, most funded blockchain game tech developers currently. That's really interesting. We'll see. It will either go, to the moon or to hell. Please don't quote this, but it's going to be fun. So working on a bunch of things these days. Product-wise. So the question is how we prioritize improvements to the products as a small team. I wish I could say we had some kind of method, but actually we didn't. We just experimented a lot, and we worked really hard, and so the way we always approach innovation, and that was more intuitive back in the day, and now this is more conscious. We are always seeking for some kind of secret that most of the market is overlooking. And the reason we focused on Android back in the day was because we kind of saw a secret there, an operating system that is really similar to iOS, but nobody really knows about it. It's just a bunch of geeks buying this interesting, curious phones in the US, and nobody else is looking there. So that was exciting. And then with the first games that we made, we were kind of looking for a business model that would be different. Everyone else was doing paid games, $0.99, $1.99, with a price tag on it. 1 million people buy it, you're a millionaire, you're golden. We were looking for something different, eventually arrived at free games with in the purchases. So we always had this kind of mentality, okay, everybody else is doing this. This is common sense to everyone. Is there anything everybody kind of disagrees upon that we can exploit to our advantage? So that was one of the tools we used. But generally speaking, we just experimented a lot, and we worked long days. Android was new. I put a lot of effort into learning the platform inside and out, like all the small features, all the minor device specs, all the distribution details, how the market works, where does the game end up when it's published, how we can manipulate these mechanics. So kind of trying to extract every single bit of advantage and then experimenting. And breaking some rules as well along the way. For example, we made a racing game, but we didn't license any cars. And we put a nice, shiny Toyota Supra on the icon because, Fast and Furious vibes. And we had the conversation about licensing for like 10 seconds because the guys asked, what do you think, should we license the cars? And I was like, we don't have any money. So if they come after us, they have nothing to take from us. And if we end up accidentally making some money, then we can settle it because, everybody likes money. We have something to give to the manufacturers. And that's exactly how it played out in the end. They came after us, we cease and desist letters, and we settled. And then eventually we developed this very nice friendly relationships with them, admitting our mistake in the beginning. But we had lots of the small shortcuts because, we were a small studio going up against big studios. So we had to win either by uncovering some secrets or by taking these shortcuts. In terms of features on a product level, isolating what to work on and what to skip, it's kind of a fundamental overarching question in game development because you're always facing a blank canvas. You always have literally no idea about what people will like or will not. Of course, talking to players helps. I used to do customer support just to immerse myself in this flow of feedback from the audience. That was terrible because happy people don't message you. You always get, the message from those who aren't happy. And believe me, there was so much crap in there, like death threats, like people threatening to call Russian police on us, even not recognizing we were not actually based in Russia, but anyway, written in perfect English though. And actually, as a result of that, the summer when we kind of made it with this game, and that game was #1 in its category, and we were making like €500,000 a month as a team of 5 people, essentially. I was really depressed because, that money was somewhere. I didn't experience the effects of that. What I experienced was this daily immersion in negativity coming from the place. Like coming into the office 7 in the morning, open my inbox, there's like 5,000 emails. Your game sucks. I've lost my progress. You should stop making games, So I was really, really severely depressed because and then, in many ways, they were right. Our game sucked in many ways. Like our servers were running on PHP on some kind of cheap backend because we didn't, expect 1 million daily active users. We expect 10 active users. So it was breaking all the time. And but then every once in a while, in this, waves of negativity, you could uncover something, like something people genuinely wanted, and then we saw how this fits with our overall plans, technical feasibility, business model, and then we just A/B tested. And there's no silver bullet. It's still a problem, even today when we are so sophisticated and everyone else is so sophisticated, and we're hiring people from, big companies with big names, AAA products. Everybody makes prioritization mistakes because it's so damn hard to figure out when you're in entertainment, how exactly people want to be entertained because they don't know. For hours at a time, as a gamer. It's a guilty pleasure. Mm-hmm. I don't have the data. The honest answer is, yeah. So the question was, if I know how many people actually play the games on their mobile phones consistently, like downloading many games, playing them hours at a time. And frankly, I don't have the data. I think the data is out there somewhere. It's just that I haven't come across it in years, and I don't want to lie about this. typically as game developers, we don't really care about people who don't play games on their smartphone because they're not our target audience. So we don't really, ask these kind of questions. I can tell you that within the guys who download our games, maybe 30% are really dedicated players, and the remaining 70% are occasional users. Like, when you have an idle moment, when you're in a class and the speaker is boring, you open up a game and you play it, those kind of use cases. And about 30% are really like identify as gamers. That sounds about right to me, but I'm not sure. I need a drink. Yes. No, it's a totally fine question. And not only have I been asked this question many times. By the way, should I repeat it? Yeah, how the question is how the games affect the smartness or intelligence of the kids playing those games. And not only have I been asked this question many times for obvious reasons, I have also asked this question because that's my career, and that's what I hire other people to build. So there has to be some kind of overarching mission there. We're not building, bad things. We wouldn't be. Nobody comes into game development with the intention of building, harmful products. We're always trying to make lives better, to entertain, connect through play, etc., etc. The answer is depends on what games and how much. Most of the games that people play a lot are online games, and they are inherently challenging. If you're playing online against other people, that stimulates you. I play online games as well as an adult too. I'm pretty sure it's a positive impact, not only just on my reaction times, but makes you think long and hard, quick decision making, memorizing the patterns. I'm playing PUBG mostly. In PUBG, you have to learn 5 maps on average. Like most of them are 8 by 8 kilometers. You have to know the entire map. You have to know, like, for every combination of gear, your position on the map, different gameplay elements position, the enemy's position, audio or visual information. You have to make the split-second decision. So it's really challenging. I feel really tired intellectually after playing it. Of course, when I'm trying to win. When I'm just conversation with a partner, then it's a different thing. And it's just, kind of like watching a TV series, mind bubblegum. But then, of course, you can get to a level where you're not learning anymore. You're not being challenged anymore. You're just doing something out of habit. And then, of course, it becomes, at the very least, a waste of time. Like any activity where you stop evolving, you stop challenging yourself, then it kind of becomes pointless. If it's just a question of habit, if it's a question of addiction. Do people get addicted to games? Of course, because games generate pleasure. Games reward you for doing nice things, for displaying your skill. Of course, they can be addictive. Like every other thing in life that rewards you can become addictive. Food is addictive. Speaking in front of people and getting praise for this is addictive. I don't get this too often, but if I got it more often, I would probably be addicted to it. So, there's a fine line. I won't give you the political answer. Games are always great. Depends. In some cases, can be really harmful, and definitely, this has to be taken with caution, both from a parent perspective, from the legislative perspective, and of course, from the game developer mission, integrity, social responsibility perspective as well. Awesome. Yeah, it's a tricky one, not because these conflicts arise too often, but rather because sometimes it's difficult to kind of pinpoint the scenarios. I mean, every once in a while, there's a feature that players request, especially a free-to-play game where we have microtransactions involved, and obviously, then the number one demand from the audience is always make everything cheaper. But then we cannot comply, but not because we would lose profits, but largely because it's kind of pointless. Because if it's cheaper for everyone, then everyone gets more gear in the game and everyone's more powerful, and the level of competition is the same. So it's kind of, in most circumstances, especially in online gaming, it's kind of defeating the purpose of having specific prices in the game. Then at the same time, the approach to pricing is basically driven by demand. So we actually have a data science division that's dedicated to figuring out the best pricing for each market, for each player category. So people actually design the games that have to make the decisions normally, so they don't face this conflict. Oh, is it too expensive? Is it not expensive enough? It's market forces basically. But yeah, sometimes we get in a situation where it's a nice feature to add, but it's going to destroy our economy, for example. And yes, of course, in these cases, we make the call not to include it, because if we can't make a profit running the game, then there will be no game. And then again, it's kind of defeating the purpose of running the gaming company and kind of undermining the very mission we have, because if there's no game, nobody goes. And what most players get wrong, though, is that they believe that the money that the developers make is pure profit. In reality, especially in the free-to-play game world, it's really difficult to make a profit. It's so competitive, and it's so driven by the cost of acquisition, essentially. So it's a practical example. We have a game, a real game in our catalog, which last month made around $500,000 in revenue, net revenue, I think, after all the commissions. And because the app stores take 30%. Let's begin with this. And out of this 500,000, we spent at least 200,000 on marketing. So, and that's not the most intense month. And then you have the backend cost, you have the team costs, you have all the other associated costs. So in the end, it's, and this is not the worst case. In some cases, you have a game making 10 million a month, 6 million, 7 million spent on user acquisition. And as you go to the top, you get the super powerful publishers, the $1 billion companies. They get most of the profits, and then it kind of trickles down to everyone else, and it's really, really hard there. So in most cases, when people point fingers and say, "Oh, greedy developers," it's just about being greedy. It's more about making this game a sustainable business that we can actually operate. Tricky question. In many okay, so the question again, we have a machine learning team, and the question is how much are they involved in our decision making? Would that be? Okay, how much do we consider or actually rely on the information they provide? In most cases, they just get the job done. So we're not even questioning the data and the decisions of the algorithms. We are letting the machine do its work, and then we are observing the results. And then it kind of learns over time, how machine learning works. So for example, one of the applications of machine learning we have is user lifetime value prediction. So when we spend, let's say, $5 to bring a user in, we want to know if this was a profitable move for the business or not. And for that, we need to have an estimate of how much money they will generate for the company over 6 months. So what our ML tech does, by day 3, we typically have the 6-month lifetime value with 95% plus accuracy. And then, of course, if it makes a mistake, then it learns over time, and we can kind of correct if there was a kind of fundamental error. But typically, when we integrate our ML tech, it just, we trust it. And then we kind of observe and see if it actually delivers the margins that it promised to deliver. We had this early phase when we were just building this, and we had this issue of trust from the producers and game designers. Should we trust the machine, or should we stick to our own decisions? But ultimately, it's one of it's kind of pointless to have machine learning algorithm and then second guess it, like, oh, the machine is saying this, I don't think this is right. You should then rely on human intellect and don't touch this, because it's so costly. It's like, it's like buying an airliner, and then is it dangerous to fly? I feel like walking. It's kind of pointless. the future trends in gaming, VR, hyper-personalized experiences, etc. I don't know. I don't know. There are a few things I'm really hyped about right now that we are investing in. VR is one of those. Fundamental reasons why I believe in VR. There is about 10 million devices, standalone VR devices on the market already. The flagship is obviously Quest 2 by what used to be Facebook, and Oculus, now it's Meta. And if you go to the Oculus Quest store and look at the selection of content, there isn't that much. So that's an obvious business opportunity for me. The growth of the user base is really encouraging right now. There's a lot of people saying, based on data and leaks about future devices coming, that it's going to be accelerating. So I'm really enthusiastic about that, and I like the tech. As a consumer, I like playing in VR. The turning point for us was when we started seeing comments for people who started differentiating between VR games and pancake games, as they call them, the flat 3D games, pancake games. So that was like something we were really impressed by, when people are not just playing with VR because it's kind of cool, but they're actually choosing VR because they don't like pancake games anymore. And they invented this name for like old style, simple 3D games. So there's a bunch of factors in favor of it. Whether this is gonna play out as we expect, as we want it to play out, I don't know, can't possibly know. We're just making bets, essentially. Blockchain game I'm super excited about because blockchain solves some fundamental design problems. Like the game we're working on right now is actually a game we wanted to build without blockchain, but there was a fundamental issue of the open market. I'm not sure if someone might be actually familiar with the problems of open markets in video games or any kind of simulated organizations, because when you let players trade between each other, it opens a whole can of worms. You have inflation, you have the gray markets where people buy goods from each other instead of buying from you as a developer, so you're missing out on revenue and you can't sustain the game. Amazon's new world is an interesting example. If anyone has seen that one, they are facing a deflation problem in the game economy because of the way the game is designed. So people are hoarding currency instead of spending it. So open economies are difficult to build, and blockchain is one of the solutions to the open economy problem because it provides this kind of transparency and accountability throughout, while presenting other problems. So fundamentally, I'm excited about the application of blockchain in gaming going forward. Maybe not necessarily in the form and shape we're experiencing right now, because everyone is talking about Axie Infinity and how they're making, or used to be making 10 million a day, 15 million a day in commissions or breeding costs back in August. And how there's a whole class of people in the Philippines playing the game for profit and kind of quitting their jobs to play the game full time. But this is currently being propped by the demand from the speculators and investors. So for any system to be sustainable, there has to be an income of money on one end that kind of pays for the for the time of the players playing professionally and playing to earn money on the other hand. So they are already experiencing a drop in the cost of SOP currency that's being paid out, and as a result, the income of this place is dropping. So way to earn in the current shape, I'm not sure about. In some shape, connected to NFT-based blockchain games, definitely. Other than that, honestly, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of different, interesting developments appearing all the time. We're making these selective bets every once in a while, but the nature of the market is predicting the ways people will want to be entertained is really, really difficult, because it's influenced by by human psychology and social events and such. No, I just let you know that I saw you. You'll be the next one. Is that okay? Well, other people have done that, so it's definitely possible. We actually hire people from universities. We hire people with near zero experience as well. We mostly, so back in the day, we used to hire by the skill set. because we were growing fast. We kind of had lots of different positions we needed to fill. It's different currently. For the past 5 years, we mostly hire based on attitude and values, because we've learned over time that most people, with the right kind of attitude, acquire the skills within 1 or 2 years. And we have the stories where a guy came from first year in the university, 3 years later, senior position, nice salary, nice output. So this is not outside the realm of possibility, definitely. So, worth trying. What we're typically looking for in terms of personal traits is strong sense of ownership. Like, we don't work 9 to 5 at our company. Nobody ever looks at the clock. We don't care. Like, genuinely, if you work 3 hours a day and you output, something that's valuable enough, that's fantastic, because we are, you'll be well rested. We don't have to worry about your burnout or something like that. So if you work 3 hours and get things done, then it's amazing, easier for us. We don't micromanage people. And we typically, really work hard at the recruitment stage to make sure we get the right person on board. And then if they have this strong sense of mission and alignment and trust the team around them, and they really know that they've come here to build stuff, then it's way easier to just get the ball rolling and get things done. So ownership, not as an responsibility, because responsibility is one thing. You're responsible for this, you have to do this. It's a whole different story. Ownership as in, I came here to build this or to mitigate this risk, and whatever happens, I'll do my best to get this done. This kind of ownership. There's a book called Extreme Ownership, which I highly recommend. It's quite famous. It's a bit superficial in some ways, but it kind of illustrates our approach to ownership very well. It's called Extreme Ownership, about US Navy SEALs and how they think of ownership, because, typically in a work environment, you can camouflage your mistakes because they're not that costly. At least they're not so visible. In a war environment, the mistakes are instantly visible, instantly punishable, very costly. So applying the same principle yields great results. This is what we're looking for in people. Honesty, integrity, accountability. We don't lie. We've never lied. Within the company, we don't disguise facts. We don't hide anything. All the information is in the open. So we're looking for people who are ready to come into this environment and be open, and be able to live with this openness as well. Like, if you want to know how much money this game is making, you can go ahead and just tune into my monthly call. You'll find out. Like, any metric you want to think about it, you got it. If you want to get a better view of the business, you're welcome. That's much appreciated. So if these boxes are checked, there's a good chance we want to on the team. And then the technical expertise is just a question of, directed effort sustained over several weeks or months. Handheld as a Nintendo Switch, Steam Deck. Yes, the question was, as smartphone chips become more powerful, are they threatening the handheld console market? And do I see, any kind of change stemming from this in the market? I think the handheld consoles kind of occupy a specific niche already, because they are based on a specific catalog of games that are exclusives. Like, if you go to Nintendo Switch, you'll find specific games that were designed for the Nintendo Switch, and people generally buy it because they want to play those games. So that's the way I understand the market position and the business model. But same for Steam Deck. Like, the pitch of Steam Deck is that, you get access to a Steam catalog, or subset of it. Theoretically, I haven't seen it in flesh, but that's the pitch. So every piece of hardware, when we're talking about consoles, exists in the context of content that you can consume using this device, and that's something the manufacturer safeguard, and this is something they care about, because Nintendo don't have the smartphone. They can publish their games. Actually, Nintendo were really late to the smartphones, exactly for that reason. They were one of the last major game IP owners to actually bring their games to the smartphones. And I think they've been, even after that, really conservative about it because they want to keep their IP close to them and they want to have high margins. They don't want to, get lost in the sea of different games that are abundant and pay 30% to Apple. They want to have the hardware and the software vertically integrated, control the whole supply chain and get all the margins. So in that sense, I think whatever Nintendo does is protected. There's also a question of hardware being simply more well adopted for waste scenarios with the joysticks and TV connectivity that's so easy that the smartphone cannot really match. I mean, you can attach all sorts of hardware to the smartphone, but who really does that? So I don't think it's a threat. I think they kind of coexist, and they will continue to coexist if just because of the underlying need for the hardware to capitalize on the software that they have. Does that make sense? What do I think about what? Frankly, I don't know that much. I know it's a coding school, and that's enough for me. So I don't know the details, honestly. I think that any initiative that teaches programming and immerses people into this world and provides access to human resources like myself, I think this is hugely beneficial because I didn't have that in my childhood and my teen years, and even in my early adult life. And over time, I recognize how much I missed out on. I mean, I could have learned coding at school. I could have gotten a massive advantage. There was no objective reason why I had to wait until I was like 19, 20 years old to learn something I could have learned in 4 weeks when I was 12. So I think for that alone, it deserves a lot of credit. But I don't know the details of execution because that's all that matters in the end. The big question is, do you guys come out of this, as competent and motivated experts, and get great jobs and become wealthy? And this is something I cannot answer right now. Okay, so I would assume a reasonably big game because games can be infinitely small. So, I could make a game alone and fill the roles. But, if we are talking about something, let's say a PC or console game, which is trying to compete with the existing PC or console game, something big. Definitely developers, client, server, probably graphics oriented as well. Computer graphics is one area where you actually need math and geometry. It's a lot of fun as well, by the way. Programming computer graphics is really, 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 really interesting. In some isolated cases, you can have other developer roles, but let's stick with just client and backend. Actually, we can deal away with the backend as well if the game is single player only backend. Artists, 3D artists, animators of all sorts. Again, depending on the kind of game, if you go on 2D graphics, 3D graphics, lots of animations, or just mostly basics, programmatic animations. Again, you could have, if you look at a game like GTA 5, for example, there's like 500 people on the team, obviously because, there's so much stuff in there and it's so crafted by hand and animated by hand. So there, I guess you'll find all the, like 50 different flavors of designers and animators and 3D artists and 2D artists and concept artists as well. Like a smaller game, you could have a concept artist, some 3D artists, some animators. That's about it. Game designers. Game designers are the guys who basically dictate the rules of gameplay. They also come in different shapes and sizes. Some guys are more gameplay oriented, some guys are economy oriented. Like if you're building a massively multiplayer online game with an open economy, like World of Warcraft, you're gonna have some really, really smart people, like economy PhD level smart people to design the economy, because otherwise it's gonna be a train wreck, a disaster. It's gonna be a disaster anyway, but then if you have really smart, economy-oriented game design, it's going to be like a manageable disaster that you can fix, in 10 years at least. QA, of course, customer relations, of course. Assuming your game will have customers, if it fails, you can save on QA, you can save on customer support. Project managers, just to keep the workflow organized, you typically have to have guys, putting tasks into Jira or whatever software you're using, making sure you have all your calls on time. Everybody gets, a nice detailed specification, kind of stimulated everyone to keep things orderly, because you don't want your programmers or your game designers to be doing that kind of logistical work. They need to focus on something else, and they're not really good at it. So you have project managers as well. Someone responsible for the overall scope and vision, typically called the producer or product owner. Really difficult to build a game where you don't have a central guy who kind of carries the flag and unifies the vision and can answer all the tough questions. Do we do this? Do we do that? Sound designers can have dedicated music designers as well. What else? Working with free-to-play games, data scientists, analysts, marketing people, because if it's a free-to-play game, you have to compete for traffic, essentially. That's the reality. So you have to have media buyers, PR people, marketing people on your team as well. Otherwise, it's just probably not launching. And probably someone else I forgot, and I'll get lots of hate for this later. But that's, at least with that kind of team, you can build something decent. So the question is, when we started the company, we had like 3, 4, 5 people in the team, and we made a game in 6 weeks. So if I was doing this now, what would be the size of the team? What would be the composition of it? We are actually starting this every year. We're making new games as well, and we're going through the same process where in the beginning we have the minimum viable team. In some cases, 2 or 3 people, a programmer for sure, an artist, and a game designer. So these 3 guys can do the prototype that's playable. Because at this stage, you don't need quality assurance, you don't need to manage all the processes, you don't need customer relations, you don't need a producer, because typically one of the guys carries the vision. There's just 3 of them, so it's enough to, it's not big enough to, have these problems where people kind of move into different directions. And what really helps is when the guys in the team are kind of trained in different disciplines. So developers understand art a little bit, artists can code a little bit, then it makes the whole thing easier. So with that kind of team of 2, 3 people, we do the prototype, and then we test it and see if it's fun. If it's good enough to put in front of other people, we play test it with focus groups or maybe online, maybe soft launch it. And then if it's showing promise, then we're just adding more and more people over time. So the goal is to keep the initial team really, really small. First, for cost reasons, because we don't want to be spending lots of money on unknown prototypes. You never know if it's going to be interesting or not. So by default, this prototyping money is expended. So you have to keep these teams compact. The other reason is psychological. You don't want to commit too many people to something that's expendable. We have to be able to kill these prototypes quickly because, statistically only 1 out of 20 is interesting. So you don't want to be, have 20 people work on something and be like, forget it. If it's 3, it's much easier. And then also, management overhead. Again, 20 people, hard to manage. 3 people, they sit nearby, obviously at a 2-meter distance, still can communicate easily. So we start very small and then we just add people all the time. Well, as I said, the question is what's the share of games that get killed at prototype stage? And I would say 95% is healthy, just because, I mean, if you are green lighting too many prototypes, then it typically means that either your standard is too low and you're gonna come, you're gonna be in trouble later, and that's gonna be a costly mistake, or you're not making enough prototypes. because typically what we're looking for is not just another game, we're looking for something that's going to take us to another level. So the bar is quite high, so lots of stuff gets killed early just because we're hunting for something that's really interesting. So the question is, who thinks up the ideas for the new games? Where do they come from? Just random employees or outside or some kind of process? Everywhere. There's no shortage of ideas. We always have a backlog of things we want to build. Everyone working in game development has their own closet where you prod anyone like, what kind of game you want to build? Like, oh, where do I start? Yeah, so the question is how people actually start prototyping. Do we give them like freedom to prototype whatever? Or again, if there's a process for that? It's a tricky question because on the one hand, we encourage people to come up with ideas and prototype when they are able. On the other hand, strictly from a legal perspective, they are employed at a specific project, working on specific tasks. So you don't want them, dropping this task and working on something they like at work. And if they're doing this at home, then there's a question of, burnouts and ownership because they cannot do competing games, working at CM, and having access to all the insights and all the tech and all the people there. At the same time, we don't want to like grab this stuff that they build in the free time. We want them to have ownership there as well. So there's a balance to be found. We have a special R&D division that's basically tasked with prototyping. And the best path, like if you are at Creative Mobile and you want to evolve your prototype, is to pitch it to this team and then get included. Because we can, move people around. We actually encourage people moving around different teams. So typically you would want to build something already, some kind of small, like really fast, quick prototype or pitch, like a really nice pitch for the game, pitch it to the R&D team, have them work on it and then go and join them when able. And then it kind of brews in the R&D department and then it kind of follows the testing, market validation pipeline. We have one story, which is exemplary in many ways. That's a PC VR game. I wasn't always a big proponent of VR. I wasn't always bullish on it because we started playing with it back in 2014 or 15 with the first Oculus DK1 headset. And then everybody got disappointed with VR. But we had one guy in the team who was building a PC VR survival shooter game on Unreal Engine. And the rest of the company was making casual mobile games on Unity. So it was as far as possible from the overall direction, but he brought it in and he was a technical artist. And he said, I really believe in this. Can I develop this within CM with a small team around me? And I was facing this decision. That was kind of a crappy situation because every decision was bad, because if you greenlight it and you kind of talking about company strategy and how we're doing all those things, in one engine, integrated, casual, smartphone, and at the same time, you're greenlighting something completely opposite. So that's like weak leadership. If I don't greenlight it, then I'm basically killing this awesome grassroots initiative. And the guy gets disappointed that he's still gonna build it, and he's still gonna work on it at nights, and maybe quit to work on it. And in the end, I decided that the initiative is more valuable because it's the way I want people to build games when they have this vision and they don't care if this aligns with management strategy, whatever. They know this is important and they'll be spending their nights working on it. So we gave them a small budget, a small team to work with, and then gradually over time this became one of the games I'm most proud of. Not because I made that call, but because it's genuinely loved by the players, and there's so much awesome direct feedback from the audience because it's built with love and passion, precisely because this guy had this drive to build it no matter what. So that's one way to do it. We don't. So yeah, the question, sorry, some people, how do we retain the the people who come up with great ideas so that they don't run off and start their own companies. We don't. First, because you typically don't recognize genius ideas when they're presented. It's typically, 3 years later, you're like, oh, that was amazing. Typically about games we didn't build, but we had this idea. A game we should have built because somebody else built it in 3 years and they made all the money. You don't know this. There are people who consistently come up with great ideas. That's true. The policy is if they want to start their own company, that's great. Let them go and start their own company. We encourage this entrepreneurial spirit. If someone wants to build their own business, you cannot contain it. There is no mechanic I can think of other than physical attachment to like a heater somewhere that will keep a person with the entrepreneurial drive from starting their own company. So the only way is to comply and encourage them and give them all the help and support they might need, because when that happens, you stop being an employee and an employer. You become equals. You're an entrepreneur. He's an entrepreneur. I want to be friends with this guy. If something great comes out of it, I'll be proud because it emerged from my organization. It's giving me good reputation as well. So that's fantastic. In practice, most people don't want to do this because starting a company is tough. It's risky. You kind of burning bridges behind you. It's really difficult to embark on this path and you kind of backtrack into the seat you used to occupy in the previous space, like nothing happened. Someone else is probably there already, so it's a personal risk, it's a financial risk. What people typically do, they kind of try to run their businesses on the side. Like they work at the company and then during the evenings and the nights, they're building something, which is fine as well in most cases if it's not directly competing or using any, of the company property in their business. Generally speaking, entrepreneurship in a company is great. It's providing way more benefits than drawbacks, if there are any drawbacks at all. Question. Think about it. Think about it. You had one. Any ideas that can be taken from the gaming world and applied elsewhere? Is that correct? Plenty. Gamification is a big thing. Like if you're learning a language with Duolingo, it's consistently taking ideas from the gaming playbook. Like I've been using Duolingo for like 3 or 4 years. I see them adding more and more features that are inspired by games, things that kind of exist in many free-to-play games for years. And they're just being integrated, like the social pressure, the leaderboards, the achievement system, the quest system, now they recently added the kind of season thing where you have a season starting like every month where you have to compete against some imaginary opponent. This is all taken directly from games. And it's applied in many spaces, like even I guess Estonian telecom providers are using gamification in their marketing campaigns and their outreach. So it's omnipresent. I cannot bring, besides Duolingo, I will not even go into bringing up specific examples because they're so abundant, like anywhere you look. If anything is trying to encourage you to stay around and keep up with the habit, for example, then they are stupid for not using the free-to-play game design playbook, because we've been doing this for 10 years at least in the mobile space. So there's a lot of mechanics that can be carried over, and most of that is not game specific. It's mostly human behavior specific. Is it correct to assume that a person who works in game development loves playing games? Depends on which company you're looking at, because some companies prioritize this. We prioritize this. We have exceptions. Obviously, my accounting team, I don't expect them to be big gamers because they are not actually contributing to game design much. The game designers, the gameplay programmers, absolutely. It's not a firm. By the way, I interview all the candidates. Still, I do the final step, even though we're 150 people. And I had a week where I had like 9 job interviews in 3 days. But still, I always, I always ask this question at the interview: like, what kind of games do you play? What's your attitude? And then typically, ask it very softly, like not implying that the correct answer is yes, I'm a huge fan, but kind of, leaving the door open for the other type of answer. Like, I don't care about games that much. So I had instances where people say, games are garbage, that are a waste of time. Obviously, that's a red flag, because why are you even applying for a job in the gaming company if you are taking this side of, if you're in this camp, then obviously something is wrong with your motivation. So, people who are trying to get into gaming, they have different motivations. People who actually get into the good companies, and I consider my company a good company, I would say. At least we're really meticulous about the hiring process. That's part of the checklist. And again, there are exceptions. Well, I had a job interview just last week with a guy who said, I'm not a huge gamer. I've played some games in the past. I don't play that much these days. And but then I asked him, what kind of games? You squeaky people, stop squeaking. So I asked him what games he used to play as whenever you played them, and we talked about the games he used to play, and I could see that he gets games. You don't have to play currently. You don't have to be a huge fan of something current. You have to get it. You have to understand the value of games. You have to understand that we're not making poison like some people posit. We're not making cigarettes here. We're making forms of entertainment. People are playful by nature. We play a lot. We love to play. We form friendships through play, and this dictates what kind of games we're building. Nobody comes into my company with the intention of being, building addictive games that kind of suck, away people's time. This is contrary to the mission that we have. We don't do this. And when I was talking to this guy, it became immediately obvious that even though he's not playing currently, he gets it. He knows, the value we are creating. He knows what, what the relationship between the player and the developer should look like. So that's fine. I don't play that many games myself. Like I play PUBG on PC. That's my social hangout place. I played socially. I played with the same group of people all the time. I play some mobile games every once in a while, but not too many, because I genuinely don't find them that interesting. By now, I've been doing this for 10 years. Thankfully, there are other people in the company who do this, and they're more excited and more engaged, and they are closer to actual production. So it's. But then if you look beyond the top companies, then you can find all sorts of people, obviously, because hiring people who understand games deeply means that there are people who you will not be able to hire. Means that you'll probably be paying a premium because you're putting an additional requirement on top of all the other requirements. So it's in the end, it's expensive. So some can afford that. If you look at some companies, you'll find people who like games. I don't care. I just like my salary. It's nice. Somebody had a question. I honestly think that coding gets you really far, and being engaged in other projects, like finding other people's projects to work on, to collaborate, that's incredibly valuable. Of course, some of them will be garbage, but it's all part of the process. So that in and of itself can provide lots of value for for the career, for personal development. But one thing I regret from my early stages as a professional and as an entrepreneur, I did not seek out mentors. And even when I came into contact with people who could have been really useful and valuable assets to me, I was kind of, embarrassed to ask, because I was thinking, what's the value I can bring to them? And it's crazy. Back in 2012, I went to, I think, my second professional conference in Hamburg, and I was approached by a Finnish guy who was like, "Oh, we also make mobile games. We've noticed your company, you're doing great. How about we set up some kind of traffic exchange between our companies?" And he showed me his games. One was a city building game of sorts, like a farming game, really early, hadn't launched yet, looked okay, but nothing special. And the other one was a strategy game where you had to defend the base and attack someone else's base. And that was really, really early, like placeholder art looked really crappy. So the first game was Heyday, the other game was Clash of Clans. And the guy was in Copan and the CEO of Superstar. And that was really early. That was before, I think they were founded the previous year or that year. And I was like, oh, you know, dude, that's cool. We can talk over email because we're already profitable and he was approaching us. You know, I feel good about myself. Nobody knew those guys because they hadn't shipped anything. They were just building at the time. And then I started reading the news and, you know, Supercell made 50,000 euro in a day, 200,000 euro in a day, 1 million euro in a day. And then they became this, you know, multi-billion company. And I had this connection and I maintained this connection, but it never occurred to me that, you know, I could actually go to Helsinki and have a chat with him over coffee and we could, you know, set up recurring calls, maybe talk every once a month, because I thought, you know, what's the value, you know, for a guy like this running a super hot business startup and talking with a guy like me, you know, also running a, you know, hot startup, but, you know, on a different level. So I was being a bit too humble. And then fast forward 7 years, I find myself mentoring other people consistently. And it's a no-brainer for me because there's so many reasons, because I get my ideas validated. I get this, you know, influx of new ideas from other people who are not part of my bubble. I get social capital. I get like street cred, respect points for this. Sometimes they become successful. They kind of come back to me and reward me for this. So there's like a whole bunch of reasons why mentoring, you know, smart people is super beneficial. And, you know, from the way I deliver my my presentation, you would think that I consider myself really smart, but it took me 7 years to realize this basic thing, which makes me really question my intelligence at times. So I would say, you know, outside of coding and getting good at this and working on projects and learning to collaborate with other people, just be social and seek out smart, useful people and form meaningful connections with them and maintain those because they are super useful every once in a while. Thank you for listening. You have a mic?
Yeah, and thank you for everybody for joining this code talk. We hope you had fun, and yeah, thanks again. And until next time.